Welcome to this knitted vest tutorial, a cropped version featuring a nice V neckline, so let's get to knitting. I'm just going to explain the construction. It's going to be a bottom to top vest, meaning we're going to work the ribbing first before the body. Then we're going to shape the neckline by separating the front and back sections into two. We add the ribbing for the neckline and the armholes last. For materials, we're going to be using DK weight yarn, 5mm needles for the body, 4mm needles for the ribbing, stitch markers. If you don't have stitch markers, you can also use scrap yarn, a needle for weaving inner ends, and scissors. We're also going to use a crochet hook for casting off and picking up stitches. I like to use a 5mm crochet hook to try to get close to the gauge of the work, but if you have any other size crochet hook, it also works too. After knitting a gauge swatch, I got 16 stitches by 24 rows and 10 centimeters. I did add garter stitch rows and columns on the side just to prevent curling and to get an accurate measurement of our gauge. We're all sized beautifully and differently, so I thought it would be helpful to measure your own size for this video, and feel free to use my measurements and stitch counts if you'd like. I typically wear a standard size US medium in women's. So let's get started. First, we're going to measure our waist snug around ourselves in centimeters. I included a photo of me measuring my waist for your reference. I also included a stock photo cartoon on the top left for measuring the waist if it helps. Keep note of your waist measurement. From here, we're going to divide our gauge swatch stitch by 10 centimeters, which gives us our stitches per centimeter. Keeping note of our stitches per centimeter value, next we're going to multiply our waist measurement by our stitch per centimeters value. So I measured 100 centimeters, but I added 5 centimeters for a bit of room for the vest. If you want yours really snug, you can just keep your original measurement. So for my calculation, I got 100 centimeters waist measurement plus 5 centimeters for room equals 105 centimeters for the waist. My stitch gauge was 16 stitches, so I divided by 10 centimeters, which gave me 1.6 stitches per centimeter. From here, I multiplied my waist measurement, which was 105, by 1.6 stitches per centimeters, giving me 168 stitches for casting on. I like to start the cast on by taking 2 needles and wrapping about 20 stitches on there to estimate the tail for the long tail cast on method. And I find by using 2 needles, you can create a cast on that's pretty loose, which I find easier when starting a project. So I have about 20 stitches wrapped around the needles. From here, I'm going to take it off the needles, and this is the amount of yarn that you basically estimate is the length for 20 stitches. I'm going to use this to measure out the rest of the long tail cast on. So for my project, after measuring, I need about 168 stitches plus 1 for joining. And so since this is 20 stitches, I'm just going to use it to measure with the working yarn here. So you take it here, fold it, and you put it along the working yarn like so. Right there. Mark that. And now I have 40 stitches. And I'm going to repeat this a total of 8 times since I'm aiming for 168 stitches. So that's 160 stitches times 8 with the 20 stitches. So I just continue wrapping it along like so. And yeah, once you are there, we can continue to do the long tail cast on. Once you've measured your tail, it might be a little longer, but that's okay. It's better to have longer tail than shorter, so you'd have to restart. So it's better to overestimate a little bit. From here, we're going to take our 5mm needles and start a long tail cast on. So the way I grab it is with my index finger and thumb, with the working yarn on my index finger and the tail end of the yarn on my thumb. To start off, I take the needles, go over this initial vertical line here, and wrap it around like so, like here, and I make kind of like the slingshot motion. And through the thumb, I go under the thumb area to make this little hole. Then you see that yarn in the middle, like so. I'm gonna use both needles to scoop it up through the loop we just made. And there we go, we have 2 loops on our yarn, which is 2 stitches. So now from here, it'll go much quicker with some practice, but you're probably familiar with it. If you're not, totally fine, it's okay. So from here, I do the same thing. Index finger on the working yarn, tail end thumb, make that slingshot motion, both needles. I instead now pull my thumb over here, go through that underside of the yarn to make this little hole. See that vertical line right there? Scoop it up through the thumb hole with both needles and pull through with my thumb. And there's another stitch made. And you just keep repeating that until you reach your stitch measurement. After about 40 stitches, I like to take a stitch marker and mark that as I cast on, so I know exactly how many stitches I've gone through. You can also do it every 20 stitches, every 30 stitches, whatever you are comfortable with. It's just a good practice to have while you're casting on, so you know how much you have done. So I finished casting on. Here I have 168 stitches plus 1 for a total of 169 stitches. That extra stitch is for joining, which I'll explain in a sec. We're now going to pull on our cable to loosen up those needles, since we want to do this in the round. So I like to just tug at it, and all the stitches come loose like that. So we're going to start off by doing the ribbing, but before I switch needles, I like to join in the round first, because I just find it more convenient. But from here, you want to have your working yarn onto the right side, so you can just flip it over like this. So now we have our working yarn here, which is the last stitch we just made, and then our beginning of the cast on right here. You can just move the stitches forward, and if we look over here, we want the loops on the same side so that our work isn't twisted, and you don't want to work twisted ribbing. It's tough, so just try to make sure everything is aligned so there's no twisted stitches. If you do find your stitches twisted a bit, like if they look like something like this, you can just twist it back as best as you can so that it's facing all a similar direction. We're now ready to join in the round with our working yarn on the right and the stitches we first casted on the left. We're going to knit that first stitch over to the right, And I like to join in the round by taking the second stitch here, which is attached to the working yarn, and placing it over the stitch we just knitted to secure it and to prevent any gaps as we work in the round. So to do it, I just use my fingers, grab it like this, and put it over that stitch. Like that. You can also push with your index finger to secure that knitted stitch, and I just put it off the right needle. And there we go. It's now secure. If we tug on the working yarn, you'll see that it's made this join, and we're ready to work in our stitches now. So from here, we're going to switch to our 4mm needles for the ribbing. Now that we have our 4mm needles attached, we're ready to start our ribbing. I like to take a stitch marker and place it on the right needle to mark the beginning of a round. So our ribbing is just a knit one, purl one. So we're going to knit one, insert our needle into the front loop of that first stitch, like so. We're going to pull our working yarn through the way we came from and pull it off the needle like so. And that is a knit. For purling, I like to do the Norwegian purl method, which is inserting our right needle so it's behind the working yarn, go over the stitch from the top like so, twisting our needle around so it makes this twist, grabbing the working yarn like so, and we're pulling it back the way we came from, like so, and taking it off the needle. So there's our knit and purl, and you can tell the difference between them because the knit creates this V shape while the purl has a more flatter shape with this kind of horizontal line. So since we just purled, we're going to knit now through the front loop, grabbing our yarn and going back the way we came from and taking it off the needle. After a knit, it's a purl, so insert our right needle through behind the working yarn, going on top of that stitch, twisting it like so, grabbing the yarn and going back the way we came from for a Norwegian purl and taking it off the loop. And so we're just going to repeat that all the way until we reach our beginning of the round. So knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. Just a note as you work your knit one and purl one ribbing, when you reach your stitch markers, you can actually take it off and slide it off onto the next stitch after it, because if you remember, we casted off that extra stitch we did so that it can be joined. So I just like to move the stitch marker by one stitch so the counts are easier to keep track of. And yeah, you just continue knitting and purling so that we can keep our counts accurate. So we finished our first round of ribbing. It should look like this. We can slip our beginning of the round marker over, and we're just going to continue doing knit one, purl one to our desired measurement. And I'm going to put the amount I'm doing up on the right if you'd like to follow along. and I'll meet you at the next part. So I finished my ribbing. I did about 4 centimeters to 5 centimeters. That kind of length of ribbing I like for my garments, but you can do a bit more or less depending on how you like, just enough to prevent curling as we're going to start our stockinette stitch from here. So we're going to secure our work on our cables as we're going to start using our 5mm needles for the body. Now that we have our 5mm needles attached, we're going to start stockinette stitch, which is just knit stitches all around. So even if we see a purl, we're going to be knitting that instead. And we're just going to be knitting all around. Once you get to the end of this first round here, we can move on to the next step. While working our first round of stockinette stitches for the body, at the middle of the round, take a stitch marker or a piece of scrap yarn and mark it on your needle to indicate the middle of the round and secure it with a knit stitch. This is going to be important for later. Another way you can find the middle of the round is using the corresponding stitch markers that we used to count how many stitches we have and to keep track. So for me, these stitch markers represent every 40 stitches, and I currently have 168 stitches. Having that, I have 84 stitches, so I just find the 80th stitch marker right here, which is the second one for me, count 4 stitches after that marker, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where I marked the middle of the round stitch marker. From here, continue to knit stockinette stitches, aka just knitting stitches, all the way until the end of our round. Finishing our first round of stockinette stitches and slipping over our beginning of the round marker over to the needle, securing it with a knit stitch. We're just going to be repeating that round of just knitting all around for the next couple of rounds that matches our chosen measurement. I'll write down how many rounds I'm doing on the top right here. Once we're done, I'll see you at the next step. We finished knitting our stockinette rounds for the body of the vest after our ribbing. With my beginning of the round marker already on my needle, we're ready to start the next part, which is shaping the vest with decreases. To begin, we're going to knit the first stitch, and after that knit stitch, we're going to do an SSK, which is a left leaning decrease. To do an SSK, we're going to insert our needle into the first stitch right here as if to knit normally, but we're going to slip it instead onto our right needle. Our next stitch right after that, we're going to go into it as if to purl, but we're just also slipping it onto our right needle. These two are unworked, and we're about to work them with an SSK. So we're going to insert our left needle into both of those stitches diagonally, just from the front like that. And I like to knit it from behind while it's in this position. So with our right needle, just take our working yarn and pull it through both of those slip stitches like this. And now we've done an SSK. From here, we're going to continue knitting until we've reached 3 stitches before our middle of the round stitch marker. So here I am, 3 stitches before the middle of the round stitch marker. These stitch markers that we had corresponding the initial cast on stitches, we can actually remove them now, since now that we're decreasing our number of stitches, their counts are not as important, so they've done their purpose. So 3 stitches before our middle of the round stitch marker, here we are, we're going to work a right leaning decrease, which is just a knit 2 together. To do that, we're going to insert our right needle in both of these stitches right next to each other through both of them, like so, and we're going to knit them together. Pull it off the needle, and that's a right leaning decrease, which is just a knit 2 together. We can now knit the next stitch, slip our middle of the round stitch marker, and from here we're just going to knit around until the beginning of the round stitch marker again. And we've just decreased 2 stitches from our initial stitch count, so I went from 168 to 166. Once we've reached the end of this first decrease round, I'll explain the next step. Here we are, finishing off our first decrease round with regular knit stitches and slipping our beginning of the round marker onto our needle. The round after inserting 2 decreases are just regular knit stitches all around. Once done, I'll show you the next step. Finishing our round of regular knit stitches, slipping our beginning of the round stitch marker. We're just going to be repeating those 2 rounds. So decreasing 2 stitches, then followed by regular knit stitch rounds, and then we're repeating it until you've reached your desired measurement. I'll put how much I'm doing on the top right. So remember, after a regular knit stitch round, we're just going to start again from the beginning of the repeat, which is a decrease round. Once done, we'll move on to the next step. At this point of the project, you may need to join in a new skein of yarn since your first one is used up, at least mine is, so I'll just show you how I join in a new skein of yarn. So I take the tail end of the new yarn and just have it on standby. So with our last strand of tail from the old yarn, we can just have it behind. And in our next immediate stitch, we're going to insert our needle in through as if to knit. I take the new yarn from the new skein and I just secure it onto the right needle, like so. And I just hold on to it to make sure that I have a good grasp on it, since this is our new working yarn, and I just secure it behind me, like so. Then I work the right needle through as a regular stitch. So here's a regular knit stitch, and we've now joined in our new yarn. As you can see, there's a weird gap in the front, and now we have 2 tails, one from the new yarn and one from the old original yarn. I just like to take those 2 tails and wrap it over the working yarn like this and just tighten it onto it and pull on it so that it secures the working yarn and the new stitches we formed. And as you can see, as we pull on it, the gap is now closed. And now we're ready to work as normal with our new joined skein of yarn. So there are methods to weave in as you go, but personally I like to just use a needle and just weave it in whenever I'm ready. We finish our repeats of decrease rounds followed by regular knit rounds. So from here on out, we're going to add length to our vest for the body, which is just regular stockinette, aka just knitting all around until we've reached our desired measurement. I'm going to put what I'm doing on the top right. Once done, we can move on to the next step. We finished our knitting rounds to add length to the vest body. We're now ready to section off the front and back sections. Taking some scrap yarn or a stitch holder like this, we're going to take the left side of the work up until that middle of round stitch marker, and we're going to place it on hold. So just make sure to pull the right needle forward to secure the stitches, since we're going to be temporarily placing this on either scrap yarn or a stitch holder like this. Taking the stitches off the needle, here is the middle of round marker. We can take that off now. Just make sure to secure the stitches since we're going to be working them later. If you're doing scrap yarn, just make sure to knot it, or a stitch holder, just make sure it isn't going to fall off. So now that we have this section on hold, this is our back section of the vest. From here, we're going to be working in rows. So let's go back to the side of the work with our working yarn. Now that we've sectioned off the front and back, we're going to be working in rows now. So you can take the beginning of round marker and remove it. So this is going to be our front panel. So we're going to turn our work. And here is the wrong side where we're going to be purling. So we're going to purl until the end of the row, which is at the end of your cable. Finishing our purl rounds, we're going to turn our work to the front. And we're back on the front side, seeing all the knit stitches. We're going to begin decreasing for the neckline and the armhole. So before we start, we're going to take our stitch count and divide it by 2 to find the middle of this row, and we're going to mark it. I have 84 stitches in total, so dividing by 2, I get 42, so I would find the 42nd stitch and put a stitch marker there to mark it for reference as we continue to knit. So let's continue to knit. Back at the beginning of the row, we're going to start off by knitting the first 2 stitches. And we're going to be decreasing SSK at the start of the row, so a left leaning decrease. From here, continue to knit until we've reached the middle of the row marker. Now that we've casted off our middle stitch and we have our first stitch on the right needle, we're going to continue our row, we're going to start off by doing an SSK for a left-leaning decrease. And we're going to continue knitting until we have 4 stitches left at the end of the row. We're at the end of our row with 4 stitches left. We're now going to work a right-leaning decrease. And we're going to knit the last 2 stitches normally. And there we go. We're going to turn our work to start the back side of the stockinette stitch, which is just all purls. And I'll meet you at the end of the purl row to continue to the next step. We're at the last stitch of the row on the purl side, and you can tell it's the last stitch because here is our cast off of the fiddle stitch we just did earlier, and you can see it in the front as well if you want. Don't worry about the big gap, we'll be fixing it later. So just purl it normally, and then turn our work to be back on the right side. So here we are. And don't worry about any wonky stitches, it can be fixed by blocking and as we continue our vest. So we're going to start our repeat here now, which is just knitting the first stitch of the row. And we're going to do an SSK, so a left leaning decrease. Next. Then we're going to knit to the end of the row until there are 4 stitches left. We're at the end of the row with 4 stitches left. We're going to do a right leaning decrease, which is the knit 2 together. And then we're going to knit the last 2 stitches as normal. Then turning our work to the purl side and working the purl side until the end of the row. Once done, I'll lead you to the next step. So here we're at the end of our purl side, purling and then turning our work to the right. And we're going to repeat those 2 rows again of the decreases, followed by purl row to continue the stockinette, then decrease, etc. until we reach our measurement. The measurement I'll be doing is on the top right. From here, remember to count how many rows you work in total, since we're going to be needing that for the next parts of our vest. We finished knitting those decrease rounds with the SSKs and the knit 2 togethers to create this nice beginning V-neck shape for the neckline and for here the armholes. We're going to knit 2 more rows, so make sure that you finish after doing a row of purls before we move on to the next step. We won't be decreasing or increasing for these rows. So just do regular knit and purls. Finishing the purl side of our work, we can turn our work back to the right side and we're ready to cast off. So take your crochet hook and we're going to work that first stitch as a normal stitch, grabbing the working yarn from the front area loop that we came in through, pull it off the needle, Do the same to the second stitch, like so, pulling it off the needle, and we're going to pull that stitch we just made through the second needle to cast it off. And we're just going to repeat this for every stitch on the row. Here's the last set of stitches we're casting off, pulling that last stitch through, and we've cast it off. Here's our needles. We're going to keep them since they're still attached to the other side of the front panel. I like to chain one and grab the working yarn through the current loop we have to secure the working yarn. Take your scissors and cut the tail off enough for weaving later. And we finished one part of the front panel. Now we can work on to the next side. On the right side of the work, I like to place a stitch marker just to remember which side we started on from. Starting the next part of the front panel, we're going to do the same thing but just in reverse. So here we are, we're going to start on the purl side, just like we did on this side. So take your yarn, and I like to wrap it around my right needle as I work the purl just to secure it. And we made our purl and joined in our new yarn. So I like to just make sure to grab the tail and tighten it just to secure our yarn. So just purl to the end of the row. Finishing the purl side, we can turn our work to the right side for knit stitches. For this row, and I'll repeat, we're going to be knitting the first 2 stitches. And then we're going to be doing a left leaning decrease, which is the SSK. Once worked, we're just going to knit until the end of the row. We're at the last 3 stitches of the row. We're going to do a right leaning decrease, which is a knit 2 together, and then knit the last stitch, then turn our work to continue stockinette on the purl side. So that's our row repeat. We're going to continue doing this row repeat for the same amount of rows that we did on the other side of our neckline. Once done, we can move on to the next step. We finished our decrease rows for the second part of our front panel, and as you can see, it's starting to match the other side. After doing these decrease rows, we're going to knit just 2 more rows, or however much length you did on your other side of the front panel, with no decreases, just to add length to the shoulder part of our vest. Once done, we can move on to the next step and make sure that you end on the purl side. Finishing the purl side, we're going to turn our work to the right side, and we're ready to cast off. So here's our crochet hook. Insert our crochet hook into the stitch as if to knit, yarning over and taking our working yarn and slipping it through where we came from through that front loop and taking it off the needle, and repeat for the following stitches. With 2 loops on our crochet hook, we're going to pull that first loop through the second loop to cast off. And we're just going to repeat this until we've casted off everything. Here's the last set of stitches to cast off. Now our needles are free, and we're just going to secure our working yarn and tailing and cutting a tail long enough for weaving later. I'm just returning all of the stitches back onto the needles, and you can do the same with your scrap yarn. Just be careful not to drop any stitches, and if any are twisted, don't worry about it, we can fix it when we start knitting. Once our stitches are back on our needles, we're ready to start the back section. We're going to start by doing our purl side rows to match the front panel. So let's take our yarn, secure it on our right needle as we work a purl to attach it onto our work. Don't worry about loose stitches, it's normal. I just like to tighten the tail end and the working yarn so that the gap is not so noticeable. So work a purl row to start off the back section, and if you encounter something like this where it's a twisted stitch from just putting it back on the needles from your scrap yarn or your stitch marker, it's okay. The way you fix that is you just take it off the needle and you insert it the other way so that it's back to how you are used to doing purls. So once you're done with this row, we'll continue on to the next step. Knitting the purl side, we're going to turn our work to the right side for the knit stitches. For the back section, we're not going to split it into 2 like the front section. We're just going to be repeating this repeat row until our desired length. I have mine on the top right for measurements. To begin this repeat row, we're going to knit the first 2 stitches, and then we're going to do a left leaning decrease, which is an SSK. From here, knit to the end of the row until you have 4 stitches left. We're at the last 4 stitches of the row, and we're going to work a right leaning decrease, which is just a knit 2 together. And now we're going to knit the last 2 stitches normally. And that's our repeat row. After every repeat row, just turn your work, and we're going to work the purl side until we get back to the right side to continue that repeat row. Once done, we'll move on to the next step. We finished our repeat rows for the back section. I have mine just at the measurements above, and I like to stop here around 4 or 5 rows, just matching the front panel section, since we're going to now cast off the middle stitches and we're just going to finish the shoulder straps by knitting however much stitches we have on the front. We're going to match it onto the back side while casting off the others so that we can start weaving in after. So at the front panel, I have 11 stitches casted off from the straps that we did earlier. So we're going to knit the same matching amount of stitches here, then cast it off every stitch up until the last 11 stitches, or however many stitches you have as well for your shoulder strap. So here I will show you. Make sure that we are on the knit facing side, so that means you should have ended on a stockinette purl side, so that we have our working yarn here on the right side. So to begin, just knit the first 2, 1, 2. And so we've been keeping up these decrease SSKs. We can do the same thing as well, or I just like to opt it out for the last part of the back section shoulders, since we're just matching the front panel for weaving in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've knitted the first 11 stitches of the row. We're now ready to cast off the middle section, and we're going to be casting off every stitch until we reach the last set of stitches that matches our front panel straps here. I'm going to be casting off until I have 11 stitches left. So securing our work, I have my crochet hook here, and I'm just going to cast off as what we've done before. So we finished casting off the middle section so that we have 11 stitches left. For this stitch, I'm just going to put it back on my left needle. I'm going to take the right needle, and I'm just going to knit these two together to secure that last cast off stitch. There we go. This is considered our 11th stitch of the row. And so from here, we're just going to knit normally until the end of the row. And we don't need to decrease anymore since we're just knitting. Okay, here we go. And so the other side of the back panel is on our cables here, so it's fine. We'll just have it floating there while we work this left side first. And so we're just going to be working stockinette, so purling on the wrong side and then knitting on the right side. And if we match the back panel to the front panel like so, I have about, I'd say 3 or so matching the back panel and the strap. I have about 3 or 4 rows, that's my hair there, 3 or 4 rows left to match the back panel length to the front. So I'm just going to knit 3 more rows, making sure to end on the right side so that we can cast off. Once done, we can go on to the next step. Here I am working the purl side of the stockinette stitch, turning back to the front. I'm satisfied with the length of the back panel as it matches the front panel pretty well in length when I place it together. You can see it's lined up pretty well since we're going to be weaving in soon. So we're ready to cast off this section of the back panel. So taking our crochet hook, making sure we're on the right side, and we're just kind of cast off as we've done. Finishing the last cast off right here. And we're ready to cut it off to leave a tail for weaving in. There we go. Now we're going to do the other side of just knitting 3 or so more rows to match the front panel. Then ending on the right side, casting off, and then we're ready to weave in the front and back panels. Securing our work and purling as normal. Finish knitting stockinette on the second part of the back panel, and make sure that we are on the right side again to continue casting off. Finishing the last cast off and securing the work, cutting off a tail long enough for weaving. We're now ready to seam our work. So we're here at the front of our vest. You can see that V neckline and then the back panel as well. That has a much more longer back. So before we start the ribbing for the neckline and the armholes, we're going to seam the straps for the shoulders first. And I like to do it this way, so flipping our work so that we see the inside out. I like to take a tapestry needle and weave in the ends this way, and also use it to weave and seam. So let's do the right side first, and the steps are similar for both. So lining up the stitches together. I have 11 stitches, so I'm just going to line up those V's from where they were formed from casting off. And this is one tail that we can use to weave, and there's also another tail we can use to weave. You could even use both to weave, whichever is more comfortable for you. I'll be using this right side here in front. So just take a tapestry needle and put it through the eye hole. So to start, lining up those V cast offs first, and you don't have to worry about lining up every V exactly, as long as they're pretty much uniform as best as you can. So here's that first V. I like to go in to the first V to secure it through like this. Just like to go through that V, and then I find the corresponding V on the other side, which is this one, and I just go through both loops and pull through the tapestry needle with the yarn, so it ties those two parts together. And we'll be doing that for the next remaining stitches. So demonstrating again, finding the next available V. Here we go. That. Finding the next one after it. Here it is. Making sure to go through both and just pulling the tapestry needle through. And we'll just be doing this for the remainder of the stitches on both sides of the shoulder straps, trying your best to match the stitch count, but as long as you're really seaming at the top and just trying to keep it as uniform as best you can, it doesn't have to be too perfect, since we're doing it in the inside or the opposite side of our work that's going to be shown when we wear it, so it's a nice way to hide seams. Once we've seamed each stitch as best as we can flip it to the right side up and see that it's formed a pretty much flat joining of the front and the back panels. And I really like this way since I prefer just having a flatter seam than something that is visible from the top. So yeah, and it's joined. So just repeat those same exact steps, going into the opposite side and seaming it the same way. But before we do our ribbing, I would like to show you how I weave in ends because I like to have the ends weaved before I do any finishing touches, so it's just good practice. So inserting our work back onto the purl side so that we can seam everything together, so inside out. I'll just pick, let's see, strap to weave in. We can do this set here. So taking our tapestry needle with the tail end attached, I weave the ends in by going diagonally and through these horizontal bars, just pulling the tail through. So finding the next available horizontal bar in a diagonal way, like so. Just pulling the tail through. And I try to go a couple stitches as far as I can just to secure it. You can even go through 2 at once if you'd like. Then after going a couple stitches that way, I find a good way to secure it is next to go the opposite other way of the diagonal. So I was going diagonally left, now I can go diagonally left again, but this time more towards the bottom area. Just kind of randomizing the way the yarn goes to secure it and also keep it hidden. And then I go other ways, and by changing the direction diagonally and going through those horizontal bars, you can really hide the tails better and also secure them so they don't unravel your work. So once I've done that a couple of times, I just take a scissor and just snip it just a bit shorter, and pulling it through the work, it's pretty much secure and it just stays there. And you just want to do that with all your ends. And yeah, just diagonally, other which way, different ways through these horizontal bars. We're now going to do the neckline ribbing. Taking our 4mm needles, we're going to find that middle stitch that we casted off. So it can be a little bit hard to find it, but you can find it by finding this little V at the center of your work. So there it might be a little bit of a squeeze, but that is how the cast off middle stitch we did earlier looks like, and you can find it as well by looking directly below the V and finding that column of stitches. So from here, we're just going to start pulling in loops around the neckline to start our ribbing. So if you're like me who also struggles to get some yarn through the needle since it's a bit slippery, what I do is I take a crochet hook and I just pull yarn through like so. And then I take the needles and I place it on my needle, making sure to secure it. You can pull that tail through, making sure it's a bit long so it doesn't unravel as you go around and pick up stitches. So to pick up the rest of the stitches, I just find more vertical V's, just pulling up a loop. So the next one's here. So some of the V's are going to be tiny, some of them are going to be long like this. Just try your best to pick up as evenly as you can throughout the neckline. And trying to prevent any holes in between stitches, just try to keep it even. It doesn't have to be perfect. Once done, we can move on to the next step. Another note is try to keep the number of picked up stitches that you get around your armhole an even number. We finished picking up stitches all around the neckline. I ended on 102 stitches, so make sure you also have an even number of stitches. We're also going to take a stitch marker and mark that first stitch, which is the beginning of the round, but it's also going to be important later. From here, for our first round of the ribbing, we're just going to do knit 1, purl 1, and make sure to tighten up any loose tails. So knit 1, purl 1 all around. Once done, we can move on to the next step. Purl round for that first round. Here we are at the beginning of the round marker with that stitch marker. We can move it to the front if it's in the back. We're going to do knit 1, purl 1 for the rest of round 2, but we're going to stop just one stitch before the round ends. So once we're done, we can move on to the next step. We finished our knit 1, purl 1 all around. We now have the last stitch just before the beginning of the round stitch marker. We're now going to do a meter decrease. To do so, we're going to slip the first 2 stitches on our needle right onto the right needle as if to knit. From here, we're going to check the next stitch and see that it's a purl. You can tell it's a purl because of that horizontal bar right there. We're going to purl it as normal. And from here, we're going to slip the 2 stitches we slipped earlier over the purl we just made and off the needle, which pops it right in the front. So you can do this with the needle. Just make sure to pull on it to create a bit more room so you can see the stitch, and you can pull it over like so. Pull it off the stitch, and there is a meter decrease. And so the stitch marker creates this V that just shoots up straight, and we want it like that so that it can form our V neckline. From here, we're just going to knit 1, purl 1 for the next round, which is our third round. Once done, we can move on to the next step. So we're back here again at the last stitch of the round before the beginning of the round stitch right here. You're going to see it's a knit, and that's completely normal since we're just decreasing, and that just moves each stitch around forward. And we're going to have a knit here for our meter decrease. So same thing as last time, we're just going to knit these 2 stitches as if to knit, but we're just slipping it over to our right needle, knitting the next stitch. As we can see, it's a knit since it's a flat part, so knitting it as normal, taking our left needle through the slip stitches we did earlier, pulling it loose over the knit we just made, making sure it has enough space to pop forward like so, and slipping it off the needle. So now we have that next stitch forming vertically. And now we're back onto a purl here, and we're just going to purl 1 and knit 1 all around. So that's the row repeat you're going to be doing for the V-neck. I'm going to do this 2 more times, decreasing for each round. And then once done decreasing, we can finish off with a regular knit 1 purl 1 to finish off the ribbing. Finishing our round repeats with a final row for the ribbing neckline with just regular knit 1 purl 1s without any decreases, we're ready to cast off. So taking our crochet hook and just casting it off as we do. Finishing our cast off in the round, we can take that last stitch and secure it in the first stitch right there just to tighten up the neckline, and then chaining 1 and cutting a tail for weaving in later, pulling it through, and we've done the neckline for the ribbing. So now we can do the armholes. And so the armholes is similar, we're just picking up stitches all around. Doesn't have to be too perfect. Just try to make it into an even stitch number. And we don't do any decreases here, it's just regular knit 1s and purl 1s.